Okay, so again, those two videos focused on unit fractions because those are the ones that they make sense to us in the models. And a model is a strategy that will always work. But once we get to fractions and fraction division, the models are super confusing and they just don't make sense in our brain, okay? So we're going to review the models, but then I'm going to teach you the math behind it. And I think all of you, once you learn the math, you're going to be like, oh, that's not so bad. So who can explain to me, how can I model 4 divided by 1/3? How can I model 4 divided by 1/3? I have 4 sub sandwiches and I'm splitting them into thirds. Lainey?
You can make rectangles.
How many rectangles?
3. No.
What do I have that I'm starting with?
4.
I have 4 of something. So let's draw 4 rectangles. Okay, and I'm going to call them sub sandwiches because sub sandwiches are easy to split. Okay, I have 4 whole sub sandwiches. I'm dividing them into thirds. Carter, how do I divide those sub sandwiches into thirds? How many lines through them? 2. And I do dotted lines to show I'm cutting, just to show that that's not part of my actual shape, especially when you're using just pencil. How do I get my answer? What does my answer tell me in these? I had 4 sub sandwich. I divided each one in thirds. What is my answer, Elia?
13.
One lower. 12. I have 12 what? Now,
Pieces.
12 pieces of sub sandwich. So my answer would be 12. 4 divided by 1/3 is 12. What about the next one? These ones are a little bit harder to model, not impossible. We always start with what do we have? What do we have to start with in this one? Elise?
1/3 of something.
1/3 of something. So let's do a sub sandwich, but let's just make our rectangle a little bit bigger. I'm going to show that I have 1/3. So there's 3/3. I only have 1/3 there. I'm going to shade that in. That's what I have to start with. I have 1/3 of a sub sandwich. I was hungry and I already ate the other 2 parts of it. What do I have to do to just that piece of my sandwich, Augie? Split it into how many equal parts? 4 equal parts. And again, we have to visualize the whole sub sandwich, not just the one that's left. So now I'm going to split this into 4. You can do dotted lines or solid lines. So 3 lines makes 4 parts. So I had just that black section left. I had to split it between 4 people. How do I get my answer on these ones? What do I put my focus on? How do I get my answer on these ones? Carter? Not all of the shaded in pieces. This is where it's tricky. Lainey?
You have to count them all. Like, yeah.
We will have to count them all for something. Elise?
You count, they each get 1/4.
Not 1/4.
1/12.
Why 1/12? So our answer on these ones is the size of 1 piece. So I want you to circle just 1 shaded piece. So it'd be 1 out of, and Elise was correct, 12. So if I had 1/3 of a sub sandwich and I'm splitting it between 4 people, 1, you guys are still going to be hungry after you eat that sub sandwich because each of you are only getting 1/12 of the original sandwich. That means you're each getting 1 inch of a 12-inch of a foot-long sub, if it's actually a foot long to start with. Okay? So you're all going to go home hungry. Now, the models are good visuals, okay? But it's hard to remember, do I count all of it? Do I not count all of it? What am I counting to get my answer, okay? So the math to do these really isn't that challenging. And the models only work if there's a unit fraction involved. Who remembers what is a unit fraction? Said it in the video, and it's the only fractions we've talked about. Addie? Yeah, a 1 is the numerator, okay? So models are really only helpful if we have unit fractions, okay, which is unrealistic. We see a lot of fractions that aren't unit fractions. So the math behind these Divide fraction rule. We don't divide fractions. It's kind of like dividing by decimals. We don't divide by decimals. We have to adjust it to make us divide by a whole number. In fractions, we do not divide fractions. We multiply by the reciprocal. What word do you not know up there? Reciprocal. Everybody say that word, reciprocal. Does anybody know what a reciprocal is? It's probably the first time you've ever heard it, and it's actually super simple. It's just, book definition is any number times its reciprocal equals 1. Doesn't help, right? Any number times its reciprocal equals 1. You flip the fraction. Okay, so let's look right here. 1/5. If I flipped 1/5, what would it be? 5/1. The reciprocal of 1/5 is 5/1. What do you think the reciprocal of 2/5 is? Addie? 5/2, 5/2. Now, whole number 3. Before I can find the reciprocal, I need a fraction. You can only take the reciprocal of a fraction. What is the fraction that's equal to 3? 3/1. So let's write that equals 3/1. And then, Elia, what is the reciprocal of 3/1? 1/3. Now, it says that, again, the book definition is any number times its reciprocal is 1. If I multiplied these two fractions, I would get 5/5, which reduces to 1. If I multiplied the one above it, 5 times 2 is 10, 5 times 2 is 10, I'd get 10/10, which equals 1. Okay, so reciprocal, you just flip the fraction. So the rule is we multiply by the reciprocal. My trick is KFC, and it doesn't stand for Kentucky Fried Chicken. Okay? It stands for keep the first fraction the same, drop it down. We don't change it at all. Flip the second fraction, that's our reciprocal. Change the sign to multiplication. So we do not divide, we multiply by the reciprocal. And to help us remember what that means, we remember KFC. So I'm going to go back over here because I skipped it. First, we must have two fractions. It's just like dividing. We cannot divide mixed numbers. We cannot divide whole numbers. We have to change them to improper fractions first. Don't have to worry about that today. Okay? And then once you do the KFC, you now have a multiplication problem. Do we know how to multiply fractions? Yes. How do we multiply fractions? Elise? Yeah, multiply them straight across. Reduce, cross cancel if possible. Okay? So we're going to do a couple. We're going to start with the ones at the top. Okay? 4 divided by 1/3. I want you to split this box in half. 4 divided by 1/3. We already know what the answer is because we worked it up at the top. I'm going to show you the math behind it, not the model. First, we have to have two fractions. Who can redo that problem with two fractions? Gabe? 4/1 divided by 1/3. So first we must have a division problem with two fractions. Then we do not divide fractions, we multiply by the reciprocal, which again you can think KFC. K stands for keep the first fraction the same. So we just drop it down. Keep the first fraction the same. Augie, what does the F stand for? Flip the second fraction. If I flip 1/3, what's it going to be? 3/1. What does the C stand for? Emma? Change the sign to multiplication. Now we just multiply normal. What's 4 times 3? 12. 1 times 1? Does 12/12 reduce? To what? Just 12. Anything over 1 is just that number. Okay, so that kind of takes the thought out of it, is because a lot of times people will give me an answer of 1/12 when the answer is supposed to be 12 if we're looking at models because we forget where to find the answer. Let's go ahead and do the next one. 1/3 divided by 4. What's my next step going to look like? Bryson, what do you think my next step's going to look like? In 1/3 divided by 4. First, I must have two fractions.
You must turn the 4 into a fraction.
Yeah, how do I turn 4 into a fraction?
1.
Yep, so I have 1/3 divided by 4/1. Now that I have two fractions, I can multiply by the reciprocal. So my first one's going to stay the same. What do I do to the second one? Emma? Find the reciprocal. What's the reciprocal of 4/1? 1/4. So I flip the second, change the sign to multiplication, and now I have a multiplication problem. What's 1 times 1?
1.
3 times 4?
12.
12. Yeah, it really doesn't get much harder than that tonight. I'm going to do 2 more examples just to show you. It can get a little bit harder, but not too bad. Let's do a non-unit fraction and a whole number. Ava, give me a whole number. 2. Aubrey, give me a fraction that's not a unit fraction, which can't have a 1 in it. 5/6. Okay, and what this question is asking is how many 5/6 are there in 2 wholes? Same thing. First, we must have a fraction divided by a fraction. Lexi, can you make that a fraction divided by a fraction? Okay. Divided by 5/6. Now, we do not divide fractions. What do? We multiply by the reciprocal is our rule. Our trick is KFC. Wyatt, what does the K stand for? Keep. Good job. Keep the first fraction the same. Addie, what does the F stand for? Flip the second fraction. And the C stands for? Change the sign to multiplication. Now, we could check for cross-canceling. There's nothing we can do here. Multiply straight across with 6 times 2. 12. 5 times 1. 5. Is that the best answer? Nope. Do we know how to change that to a mixed number? Yep. And to save time, I'm just going to do that. That would be 2 and 2/5. So is dividing fractions too terrible? No. I'm going to give you guys one more to try. Well, I want you to do 3/5 divided by 4/3. 3/5 divided by 4/3. Do you like dividing fractions better than dividing decimals?
Yes.
Yeah, it's easier in my opinion, but you have to know the rules, okay? So, for homework tonight, your homework's a little bit weird. We've never done it like this before. On the bottom of the front side, okay, it says, in IXL, go to skill N.4, and it tells you what it's called, and complete 10 problems. So you're not getting to a certain SMART score. It's not like a quiz on IXL. You're just going to N4. Do you think I want you to show your work? Yeah, so I should see 10 problems on the bottom here. It'll take you more time to write them down than it will to actually solve them. Then you're going to flip it over to the back. On the back, it says go to skill N.5 and complete 10 problems. So how many problems are you doing altogether? 20 problems. I will tell you 5B had about 10 minutes to get this going, and once they got logged in, I'd say most of them got it done. Okay? So it's going to take you longer to log in and write down the problems than it will be to actually do the math. I want to see number your work. So problem number 1 should have a 1 by it. Guys, listen real quick. I want to see the original problem and then the new problem when you flip it, and then you can do an answer. Okay? Original, KFC, answer. Got it? Okay. You guys have about 11 or 12 minutes before you have to switch.